Hey, welcome back to Pop Culture Graveyard. I am Hollis, and today I'd like to pay tribute to the second most important album of 1991, Green Mind by Dinosaur Jr. Everybody knows what the most important album of 1991 was. But Green Mind was released in February of 1991, whereas Nevermind was released in late September of 1991. So for a few short months, Green Mind was looking like it was going to be the most important album of 1991. And 1991 was a hell of a year for music, because it was the year punk broke. Dinosaur Jr. and Nirvana, as well as Sonic Youth, the Ramones, and others, feature prominently in this documentary about how underground music took over the mainstream for one brief, shining moment. An all too brief moment. This is a kinder, gentler Dinosaur Jr. album. For that reason, some people do not like it. I think it is the culmination of everything I wanted from Dinosaur Jr. Everything came together here. The raw aggression was tempered by the slick production and musical execution. Another cool thing about Green Mind. This album was a big influence on other alternative bands, on the British shoegaze bands, and on pretty much anyone cool who played guitar. Kurt Cobain actually asked Dinosaur Jr.'s Jay Mascis to join Nirvana back in 1989. Remember, Nirvana was a four-piece. Luckily for all of us, Jay Mascis said no, and Nirvana decided to become a trio. And that's why we got to enjoy two great albums in 1991. So we were almost robbed of Dinosaur Jr. Both of these albums are celebrating anniversaries this year, and while Nevermind is celebrated quite a bit, I thought it was only right to pay tribute to this equally brilliant classic. So please join me for a deep dive into the second most important album of 1991, Dinosaur Jr.'s Green Mind. Hell of a year for music. Before we get started, I just want to give a shout out to my latest patron. Thank you, Alan. Thank you for jumping on board. I really appreciate the support. You are the best. If you would like to support Pop Culture Graveyard, please consider joining my Patreon. It's at patreon.com/popculturegraveyard. And thanks. You know, in many ways, Green Mind was a step forward no one saw coming. Dinosaur Jr.'s earlier albums were buried underneath as much of a sonic veil as Husker Du's early work. And that left us totally unprepared for Green Mind's relatively clean and clear production. Much like Nirvana, Jay Mascis never really changed his songwriting approach, only the execution in the studio on both sides of the mixing console. This is a kinder, gentler Dinosaur Jr. album. For that reason, some people do not like it. I think it is the culmination of everything I wanted from Dinosaur Jr. Everything came together here. The raw aggression was tempered by the slick production and musical execution. Dinosaur Jr. was always an insider's band, and even people who liked the band were at a loss trying to define them. Jay has always joked that the band set out to play ear-bleeding country, which is as good a definition as any. Amherst, Massachusetts born and bred, Jay's fake southern drawl is as much of a put-on as John Fogerty's was in Creedence Clearwater Revival. But Jay's Jazzmaster guitar and big muff pedal are way louder and more articulate than Jay's voice. And it's through his guitar solos that he expresses himself best. I have always loved this cover shot. It's of a girl named Priscilla, taken at Jones Beach in 1969, and the photographer's name is Jason Szabo. Incidentally, this album was not available on vinyl in the US. This is a 1991 European pressing. Anyway, something you should know about this album. It's sort of kinda a solo album, but not really. Jay Mascis wrote this album to be a Dinosaur Jr. album. The only problem was he pretty much broke up the band right before this. He kicked bass player Lou Barlow to the curb because their personality conflicts had grown so large he couldn't work with him anymore. And he sort of kinda did the same thing to his drummer Murph, although Murph came to play on 3 different tracks here. The bulk of the drumming on this album was done by Jay Mascis himself, who is an excellent drummer. He was the drummer in the hardcore band Deep Wound, also with Lou Barlow, and Jay was the one who even taught Murph how to play drums. So the drumming on this album does not suffer. In fact, it's uniformly excellent. Jay Mascis himself does not see this as a solo album, because when he was writing the drum parts, he wrote them the way he wanted Murph to do them. And when he was writing the bass parts and playing the bass parts, he did them how he would have told Lou to do them. I know, but it made sense to him. Jay, in fact, plays all the instruments here, except for a few of the overdubs and some of the drumming. The lead-off track, The Wagon, seems to begin almost in mid-song, which immediately pulls you deep into this album's sound. Filled with plenty of guitar and vocal hooks, The Wagon is packed with so many different sounds jockeying for your ear. It almost sounds like 3 songs all at once. Once the chorus kicks in, everything goes into overdrive. The drums become deafening. The bass picks up the pace. And as the guitar's volume increases, we hear the ghost of another soloing guitar on top of it, playing whatever the hell it wants. The effect is dizzying and will put you back on your heels, especially if you listen through headphones. Jay is joined on guitar and backing vocals by Don Fleming. Don was in the band Gumball and also produced Sonic Youth, Hole, The Smithereens, and a lot of other cool bands. Anyway, this track is the first of 3 that feature Murph on drums, and he does a wonderful job. The lyrics to The Wagon almost speak to a relationship gone sour, or a relationship that never happened. I ring the doorbell in your mind, but it's locked from the outside. You won't see me. You won't see me. You don't live there anyway, but I knock on it all day. You won't see me. The song's brilliant because it sounds upbeat, and it's even got the vocal hook. Baby, why don't we? Baby, why don't we? As I see it, this is a song about trying to connect. And that's a refrain on a lot of these songs. He's trying his hardest to get this person on the same page as him. Here's a wagon. Get on it. For a guy with a reputation for being apathetic, there's an awful lot of pleading going on this album. The Wagon probably has my favorite ending of any Dinosaur Jr. song. It's all dying, wailing guitars and squealing feedback until the power is just cut off. The Wagon, incidentally, reached number 22 on the modern rock chart at a time when the mainstream rock chart had a top 10 that included Silent Lucidity by Queensryche and A Lil Ain't Enough by David Lee Roth. That's right, I said Lil. That should key you in as to how against the grain this band was. Featuring some wonderful acoustic guitar accents, Puke and Cry is an up-tempo song that doesn't lose any of its power just because it's beautiful. This might just be Jay's best vocal performance on this album, complete with his backing vocals a tad behind his lead vocal. His voice alternately bites, snarls, and cajoles, with plenty of vocal hooks, including "Come on down, come on down." Very hee-haw. This is another example where he's asking someone to move closer to him. And my personal favorite, "Do you, girl?" Those lines hammer home the country part of Ear-Bleeding Country better than most. This track seems to be an appeal to a girl, which is a nice side to see from Jay, with lines like, "Let's sift through all your feelings," which strikes me as a charming sentiment, and as coming from someone who understands just how messy emotions truly are. I see this song as a plea to someone who's been messed up by life and is going through a very personal sickness and sadness, and the song's subject is asking that person to let them into their life. Musically, the song has a breakdown close to the end for an odd, dreamy kind of respite that always reminds me of the false opening to Sweet Jane on the Velvet Underground's Loaded album. It's that kind of pretty until it comes roaring back to life to reestablish all of its infectious hooks before finally stopping on a dime. Intertwining guitars, incessant drumming, and mind-thudding bass will pummel you into sweet submission on the murky Blowing It / I Live for That Look. 2 songs effortlessly intertwined back to back. The electric guitar is backed by an acoustic guitar, a formula that works on most of this album, and the lyrics to Blowing It are just perfect. For someone as notoriously uncommunicative as Jay Mascis is accused of being, I'm blown away by the unflinching honesty of a line like, "I don't know a thing to say to you." It's simple, it's plain spoken, and it's a great lyric. And for someone who supposedly has a massive ego, a lyric like, "Or am I blowing it again?" can't help but paint him as self-effacing and endearing. The second half of this pair, I Live for That Look, in lots of ways feels like an anti-love song. Of course, being Jay Mascis, it's not overt lyrically. The song has a carefree feel, but the lyrics are anything but carefree. Lines like, "Hey, I live for that look," are perfectly balanced with "Hey, get out of my head," and "Hey, be better this time." Alienation never tasted so good. It's a wonderful song, whose only misstep is the fade out during the song's freak out outro. Not the last time that would happen. Flying Cloud is a gorgeous, short, interstitial ballad. A brief respite in which to catch your breath amid the sonic onslaught of great songs. The acoustic bass you hear is by Don Fleming, with drum and tambourine by Jay Spiegel, who was the drummer in Gumball. I believe this pretty song is about skiing with someone you love. Top of the mountain, the bottom of the mountain, the flying clouds, and the chairlift that brings you together. Of course, there could be deeper meaning, a metaphor for death, but let's keep it happy. The track, How'd You Pin That One on Me, doesn't so much begin as much as it feels kick-started to life like a powerful Harley Davidson. If you dig underneath the raging guitar of How'd You Pin That One on Me, you'll find a downbeat song of lost love and a messed up mind. Almost as if the song is being told from the point of view of the subject of the song Puke and Cry. Especially the lines, I don't know why you see me. I don't know a thing to be. By the way, I can't believe the lines, my move or do I chuck it, stare it in the face or duck it, get me a bucket, happen in this song rather than Puke and Cry. That seems like a natural. This song could be seen as being about a romantic interest, but I like to see it as being about his ex-bass player, Lou Barlow, who was sniping at Jay in the press constantly, and who Jay had to keep running into given the small size of their indie music scene at the time. Especially Barlow-esque are the lines, tension running, how, what for, don't think I'm into you anymore, falling off the pace, run into you most every place, and I hardly go outside. After a few minutes of the musical maelstrom, Jay rips out one of my favorite solos on the whole LP. The solo is rough and barely restrained, and it's layered over what sounds like several other sloppy guitars at work. It creates the most lovely dissonance. Side 2, track 1, the power slot, goes to Water, a gorgeous mid-tempo tremolo twanger that sees Jay's croak of a voice convey more feeling here than people give him credit for. By the way, this song is the second appearance of Murph on drums, who does a fine job, albeit with the proviso that he's only playing what Jay told him to. That said, you wouldn't know it, because there's a spontaneity to Murph's work. As for the lyrics of this song, J Mascis came up a straight-edge kid, but he later dabbled with enough drink and drugs to understand the pitfalls. So if you see water as a metaphor for drug use, the song takes on a much deeper meaning, with the lines, scary things across the water. You'd never know till they have their way with you. You won't catch me deep in the water, however much I want to play with you. Those lines again can be taken two ways, for both romantic partners and band members alike. This song also fades out. And I really think that this album could have gotten away with being a double album simply by not fading out any of the songs and allowing them to be the 10-minute versions they all seem to want to be. I'm reminded of the story where Miles Davis was questioning the length of John Coltrane's solos when he was playing with Miles. And Train said, I don't know how to stop. To which Miles replied, try taking the fucking horn out of your mouth. That's what the endings to a lot of songs on this album feel like. Jay just taking the horn out of his mouth. The fade-outs feel abrupt and unnatural. That said, there's only so much music that can fit on one record, so it makes sense, and none of the songs suffer because of the fade-outs. The next song, Muck, is, for lack of a better word, funky as hell. Muck is by far the easiest song to dance to on this album, and Jay's voice was never sexier. He's actually shadowing his own laid-back voice with a falsetto, and that effect produces, aside from Flying Cloud, the prettiest song on the album, with the repeated cries of its choruses going, hold back, hold back. Muck actually seems to be a celebration of J Mascis's own passive aggressiveness. When someone gets in his face, he just crawls into his mind and does not respond at all. And that's the genius trick of this album, is over and over again it conveys the feeling that it doesn't want to convey any feelings. The lovely Mellotron intro to the next song, Thumb, is played by engineer Sean Slade, and luckily it continues right through the song. Thumb perhaps sounds more like a hit song than any other here. It's a mid-tempo track with lots of flanging guitars and a heaping helping of vocal hooks, and it's pretty damned irresistible. If you've never heard this album, start by listening to Thumb. It should unlock the rest of the album for you. Conversely, if you listen to Thumb and you don't like it, it'll save you some time, because you won't like this album. The song's chorus goes, there never really is a good time. There's always nothing much to say. Pretty good, not doing that fine, getting up most every day. Has there ever been better lyrics for the slacker generation? I love the getting up most every day. He's not getting up every day. but most every day. Mwah, perfect. Painted mostly as the guitar god that he rightfully is, I don't think Jay gets enough credit for his lyrics. For my money, Thumb features the most languidly luxurious guitar solo on the entire album. And again, the song is faded out. I like to imagine the original studio version being an hour long, kicking off with a high-pitched, "How you doing?" The title track and album ender, Green Mind, is one of my favorite songs on this LP. The lyrics to Green Mind, as well as the title, speak to someone who lives in his own head a lot, with lines like, "I've been picking through my thoughts." I think it's about Jay turning his jaundiced eye toward the scene that supported him as a guitar god, but also kept him in a sort of box. It's a scene also that Jay seems to have not felt much of a kinship with, as evidenced by the line, "Come to my side, and I'll introduce you to some of their kind." I think the song's subject wants to escape into a relationship to save himself from the scene. A very musically sophisticated song. Green Mind's chorus has different lyrics every time we hear it. My favorite stanza of the chorus sees Jay at his most plain-spoken. On a certain level, I think they're great, but on another, I can't relate to anything they do. I've been bouncing off the wall. I can't handle them for long. They're cool, but I need you. What? Are you kidding me? Those are lyrics. Jay saved one of his tastiest, face-melting guitar solos for this song, and it makes up in intensity what it lacks in length. And I think he's plugged into the board. The solo overwhelms the entire track. Deliciously nasty solo. It's got stank on it. So nasty. It really is the perfect track to end the album on. And if you know Dinosaur Jr.'s stuff before and after this album, but don't really know Green Mind, you are in for a treat. If you would like to explore further, I highly recommend Martin and Me. This is a 1995 solo acoustic tour that Jay Mascis did. This came out in '96. It's got great versions of Thumb, Blowing It, and Flying Cloud off of Green Mind that you may even wind up liking more than the album versions. It's also got covers, everyone from the Smiths to Leonard Skinner. The Martin, by the way, in Martin and Me is his acoustic Martin guitar. Highly recommended. For most of you, the best of Dinosaur Jr. should suffice. Ear Bleeding Country. It's a fantastic overview that includes several eras of the band, and I really think you'll love it. If you enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and click the like button, and don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next week with a lot more cool stuff.